They say a camera never lies. But what do you do with frames that make even people with scientific degrees get goosebumps? Today is a collection of photographs where logic gives up and imagination only keeps throwing in new questions. We will look at strange archaeological finds, mysterious creatures, ghosts on film, and phenomena that seem not to fit into the familiar picture of the world. Enjoy watching. In the Peruvian Nazca Desert, if you look from the ground, you see just stones and a dusty plateau. But as soon as you rise into the air, gigantic figures suddenly appear before your eyes. A hummingbird, a monkey, a spider, strange geometric schemes, and kilometer-long arrows pointing nowhere. These lines were cut into the ground almost 2,000 years ago. The Nazca people knew nothing about airplanes, drones, or satellites, and yet they created images that you can truly appreciate only from a bird's-eye view. Scientists have argued for decades. It is a cult of rain and gods, an astronomical calendar, a map of water sources, or something entirely different. But the main question remains unanswered. How did people who had neither GPS nor theodolites manage to draw dozens of huge figures on stone so precisely without seeing them as a whole? And why did they choose exactly these symbols? The more lines are found, the harder it is to say, is this simply a religious ritual? Or a message whose meaning we still simply do not understand? In the 1960s, a woman appeared in the USSR, about whom even those who did not believe in any paranormal things spoke in whispers. Ninel Kulagina. On black and white film you can see, she sits at a table, and opposite her, there are matchboxes, compasses, metal balls. She strains, breathes heavily, and objects begin to move. The compass needle turns sharply. Small objects seem to be pulled toward her palm. The experiments were conducted not in an occultist's basement, but within the walls of the Academy of Sciences of the USSR. Scientists recorded pressure, pulse, temperature, filmed everything on secret newsreel, and documented every session. Skeptics are sure it is an illusion, sleight of hand, hypnosis of the viewer. But here's the strange thing. No one ever managed to recreate her tricks exactly. And some of the materials are still kept classified and raise a lot of questions. If it is a trick, why study it for so many years? If it is not a trick, then what does it say about the possibilities of human consciousness? In the jungles of Costa Rica, among damp greenery and insects, you can stumble upon a strange sight. In the middle of the grass lies a stone ball of an almost perfect shape, then another, then a dozen. More than 300 such spheres are known. Small ones, the size of a fist, huge ones, more than 2 meters in diameter. They are made of granodiorite, an extremely hard rock that is not easy to work with even using modern technology. The main mystery is not in how they were carved, although that is impressive too, but in why someone needed to create hundreds of perfectly round stone balls and place them across the landscape. There are many versions: celestial bodies in a stone calendar, markers of power, symbols of gods. But not a single city, not a single workshop, and no detailed legends about the creation of these balls have been found. Who shaped them? For whom? And why did people then simply leave, leaving their stone signature in the jungle? At the beginning of the 20th century, Greek divers found what seemed to be an ordinary ancient shipwreck near the island of Antikythera. Amphorae, statues, fragments. But among the pottery lay a strange piece of metal, all covered in corrosion. Only years later did it become clear. Before us was a device with gears, scales, and inscriptions. A most complex mechanism, created approximately in the 2nd century BCE. Today, it is called the first analog computer in the world. This device could calculate eclipses, show the position of the sun, the moon, and the planets, track the cycles of celestial bodies. For its time, It is like a smartphone in the Stone Age. Yes, scientists partially restored how the mechanism works, but they are still not completely sure whether all of its functionality has been deciphered. Who built such a complex system of gear trains? Was it a single toy of a genius? Or the peak of long-forgotten technologies? And most importantly, how many such devices have we still not found? Today, the Eiffel Tower is a symbol of romance, postcards, cinema, declarations of love. But in a photograph from 1887, it looks like a huge metal structure in the middle of a construction site. In the picture, you can see only the frame of the future giant, hundreds of workers, scaffolding, rivets. No one knows that in a couple of years, this piece of iron will become the most recognizable object on the planet. The tower was assembled from 18,000 metal parts, fastened by approximately 2.5 million rivets, and done by hand. At that time, it was the tallest man-made structure in the world. The irony is that back then, many French artists and writers demanded that it be demolished, calling it an iron monster. But history decided otherwise. The construction photo reminds us that sometimes the most controversial decisions become something without which we can no longer imagine the world. On the territory of ancient Ubaid in Mesopotamia, archaeologists found terracotta figurines about 6,500 years old. At first glance, they are ordinary idols. But if you look closely, they have elongated heads, almond-shaped eyes, scaly skin. Some hold infants, others hold staffs, as if they are rulers. These are not monsters, but quite social characters, only very Pohogine reptiles. Why would people of the era before the Sumerians sculpt humans with the features of lizards? Is it a god connected with water or the underworld? An image of priests in ritual masks? A memory of some very strange myths? Of course, UFO enthusiasts quickly saw ancient aliens here. Science is more cautious. But the fact remains. The Ubaid figurines stand out from the usual range of ancient art and continue to stir the imagination of everyone who sees them. In the 1990s, tourists explored a cave in Ras Al Khaimah in the UAE. An ordinary walk, dark vaults, a camera flash, laughter, until one of them took a picture deep in the passage. Later on the frame, they noticed a strange figure, half hidden in the shadow, something that does not look like a person or a familiar animal. The story became even darker when the group heard a piercing child's scream coming from the depths. They called the authorities. Searches began, and in one of the branches of the cave, they found the body of a boy. The photograph, the body, the rumors about a creature in the cave. To this day, no one can connect everything into one single logical picture. Some are sure this is proof of the existence of an unknown species. Others say that it is all staged and is just a play of light. But try to look calmly at this frame, knowing how the excursion ended. Winter of 1959. 9 experienced hikers set out on a trek in the northern Urals and do not return. Their tent is found cut open from the inside, the bodies scattered on the slope, some with injuries resembling the consequences of a crash or an explosion. But in this tragedy, there is one more eerie element: the film rolls. On one of the frames, there is a blurry figure between the trees. People called it the Yeti photo. Some see a person in dark clothing there, others see a silhouette unlike an ordinary hiker. The picture gives no answers. It only adds questions to an already mysterious case. What happened that night on the pass, and who or what could have been near the group? In 1975, a married couple, Diana and Peter Barrett, went into an old church in Norfolk. They took several photos of the interior. Empty pews, the altar, stained glass, nothing unusual. But when the film was developed, on one of the pews, there was a figure in white, as if a woman wrapped in a light shawl. According to legends, in this church, they really did see the White Lady as far back as the Middle Ages. The authors of the photo themselves assured, at the time of shooting there was no one inside. The rector of the church stated that he found no signs of a hoax. Photo experts also could not prove interference. Skeptics talk about an accidental flare, a play of light and shadow, but agree. In the photo, the silhouette looks too alive and expressive to dismiss it as just a light spot. That is why this frame still remains among the most discussed photo evidence of ghosts. 1967, Northern California. Two men, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin, are filming the bank of a creek. Suddenly, a figure covered in dark fur appears in the frame. It walks, almost not paying attention to the people, then turns its head and goes into the forest. This short film became perhaps the most famous evidence of the existence of a Yeti or Bigfoot. It was studied frame by frame. They looked at muscle work, at body proportions, at the head turn. Skeptics insist it is a person in a costume. Supporters of an unknown primate answer, to make such a costume in the 1960s would require Hollywood-level technology, and the movements are too natural. The argument has lasted for decades. And the frame itself reminds us, sometimes the main thing in a mystery is not the answer, but how many people it forced to seriously think, do we really know everything about our own forests? (1971), the Apollo 14 mission. Astronauts Alan Shepard and Edgar Mitchell work on the surface of the moon, and images come to Earth with an unusual effect. On the horizon, there are strange glowing formations. These lights appear in several frames, as if they move, have clear contours, a lens flare, lunar dust, an electrical discharge. Such versions were voiced, but the astronauts themselves stated they observed these lights with their own eyes as well, from a distance of several kilometers. A clear official version that would close the question never appeared. Therefore, the lunar lights of the Apollo 14 mission still appear on lists of space mysteries, leaving room both for scientific explanations and for lovers of theories about guests on the moon. In the Namib Desert, if you look from above, the ground resembles strange honeycomb. These are the so-called fairy circles, round patches of bare earth surrounded by low grass. Some are small, others reach tens of meters. Local legends explain them simply. Gods descend here. Spirits dance here. These are traces of supernatural forces. Scientists propose their hypotheses. Underground termites, plants competing for water, gas release, or even local radioactivity. The problem is that no version yet explains the whole picture: the scale, the shape, the stability of the pattern. So these circles remain a difficult task for science, and a beautiful reminder that even a desert can be a huge, mysterious drawing. The 13th of March, 1997. Residents of Arizona went outside in the evening, and many saw something they still remember. Over the state, a huge object or a formation of lights moved slowly and silently. Some saw a giant letter V in the sky. Some saw a vague outline of a big saucer. Thousands of people reported the sighting, including pilots and military personnel. The U.S. Air Force later explained everything as training exercises and dropped illumination flares. But eyewitnesses insist what they saw moved too evenly, was too enormous, and behaved not like ordinary signal lights. Even the governor of the state years later admitted that he also observed this phenomenon and does not consider the official version convincing. The case went down in history as the Phoenix Lights, and to this day remains one of the most documented mass UFO sightings. In 1513, the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis drew a world map. On the parchment, you can see familiar outlines of Europe, Africa, part of South America. But the main thing is at the bottom. There, something very similar to Antarctica can be guessed. And moreover, without an ice cover. How could a person of the 16th century depict a continent that, officially, no one in Europe knew about then? And in such a way as if he had seen its coastline before ice hid it. Piri Reis himself wrote that he used some ancient sources and maps compiled by other peoples before him. Hence the versions, a legacy of a lost civilization, accurate maps of ancient origin, or simply a complex puzzle of fragmentary data that accidentally formed familiar outlines. One way or another, the map of Piri Reis remains a favorite argument of everyone who is sure. Our official history of geography knows far from everything. The 22nd of November, 1963, Dallas. The motorcade of President John Kennedy moves through Dealey Plaza. That day was filmed by dozens of cameras. In many frames, among the people along the road, there is a woman in a headscarf, like a Soviet grandmother, only in the middle of an American crowd. She holds something like a camera in her hands and continues filming even at the moment when the shots ring out. Later, investigators and journalists try to find this woman, nicknamed the Babushka Lady, and get her film. But neither she nor her recording ever surfaces. Who was she? A random witness who was simply frightened and disappeared? An agent of special services? Or even a person mistakenly taken for a witness? The absence of her film adds yet another layer of mystery to the already complicated Kennedy case. At the beginning of the 20th century, the antiquarian Wilfred Voynich bought an old manuscript. Parchment, beautiful miniatures, neat text, and not a single familiar word. The pages are filled with strange plants that do not exist in nature, circles and stars that do not match the familiar constellations, figures of women in incomprehensible baths and pipes. Hundreds of cryptographers, linguists, intelligence services, and enthusiasts tried to decipher this language. The versions sounded very different: an encrypted medical treatise, an alchemical manual, a herbal medicine textbook, an artfully made hoax. But the fact remains, throughout the entire existence of the manuscript, no one has convincingly proven that they understood even one line. The Voynich manuscript is like a letter from another world, frozen in parchment, and it still has no translator. 1925, the tanker SS Watertown passes through the Panama Canal. Shortly before that, 2 sailors died from gas poisoning while cleaning a tank. The bodies were buried at sea, as required by maritime tradition. A few days later, the crew notices in the water their faces, as if 2 huge ghostly profiles are looking up from below, straight at the side of the ship. One of the sailors manages to take a photograph. The frame gets into newspapers, then into the hands of experts. Some media claimed that the photo was checked and recognized as authentic, with no signs of editing. Skeptics talk about a simple optical effect, a combination of waves, light, and imagination. Those who believe in the supernatural say that the seas do not always easily let go of their dead. Either way, the photograph of faces in the waves still looks very eerie, especially if you look at it at night. In 2010, someone buys for $2 an old tin-type photograph in a junk shop. In the photo, there is a group of people playing croquet somewhere in the Wild West. Later, experts will say, one of the young men looks incredibly similar to Billy the Kid, the famous outlaw of the 19th century. If this is true, then before us is only the second reliable photo of the legendary gunslinger, which means the collectible value of the photograph skyrockets. Some specialists, using face recognition methods and analysis of proportions, confirm the resemblance. Others point to oddities. Croquet looks too aristocratic, a game for people from Billy the Kid's circle. The setting and clothing do not fully match the familiar image of his company. As a result, the photo hangs between the status of a historical sensation and a beautiful but doubtful story. And the viewer has only one way out: to decide for themselves to believe or not. The 1950s, an ordinary family photo shoot. The Cooper family sits down at the table. The photographer clicks the shutter. Everything like millions of other people at that time. But when the film was developed, the photo stopped being ordinary. Behind the smiling adults and children, a strange dark figure is hanging, like a person falling upside down or hanging in the air. The contours are blurry, but it seems that it is precisely a human silhouette. The relatives claimed, at that moment, there was no one else in the room. Supporters of the paranormal immediately saw a ghost in it. Skeptics talked about a technical defect, double exposure, or a frame overlay. 1964, Australia, Stonehaven Bay, near Hook Island. A vacationer, Robert LeCirque, is crossing by boat with his family and notices something strange in the water. A huge, elongated, dark mass resembling a gigantic tadpole. He takes several photos. In the photo, you can see a creature, estimated at 20 to 25 meters long, with a wide, flat front and a long tail. Some saw in this a prehistoric monster that survived to our days, like an ancient reptile or a giant ray. Others immediately suspected a fake, supposedly dark film or fabric sunk with stones. However, to this day, there is no unambiguous proof that it was precisely a prop, and the photo continues to live its own life. For some, it is a symbol of how easily perspective deceives us. For others, it is yet another reminder that the ocean holds much more than we are used to thinking. Imagine a photograph from the time of the American Civil War. Several soldiers pose in front of the camera, and at their feet lies something with huge wings and an elongated snout. Supporters of the mysterious are sure. It is a pteranodon, a prehistoric flying reptile that they allegedly managed to shoot down. Skeptics talk about a stuffed animal, theatrical props, or even later, creativity. That is, the photo could have been faked decades later. Additional confusion is added by the fact that there are several versions of such photographs differing in details. Either someone skillfully played with the myth, or we still do not know where the original ends and the fake begins. 1964, England, the county of Cumbria. Jim Templeton photographs his little daughter in a meadow. Weather, nature, a child. Everything is absolutely ordinary. But after the film was developed, on one of the frames behind the girl, you can clearly see a silhouette, a figure in a light spacesuit with something resembling a helmet. Templeton swore that during the shooting there was no one behind her. The photo was studied by the police, and even at Kodak, no obvious signs of a fake were found then. Later, a more sober version appeared. It is possibly the photographer's wife who accidentally got into the frame, but due to overexposure and the angle, she looks like an astronaut. Since the middle of the 20th century, a story has persistently circulated online about a mysterious object in Earth orbit, the so-called Black Knight satellite. Supporters of this myth claim it supposedly has been circling the planet for thousands of years, sends signals, and in general is an ancient messenger of an unknown civilization. In support of this version, scattered facts are cited. Mentions of strange radio signals in the 19th century, military reports about erroneous objects in orbit, as well as photographs in which dark debris of an unusual shape is visible. Official science explains everything much more simply. These are fragments of thermal protection, satellite debris, or ordinary space junk that under certain lighting looks mysterious. A photograph from the beginning of the 20th century over Huntington, West Virginia, a strange aircraft is hanging. It is long, streamlined, with several propellers and, seemingly, a spacious cabin, more like a fantasy engineer's project than a real airship of that time. The photo is dated 1911, that is, taken before the appearance of full-fledged Zeppelins in their familiar form. What was it? An experimental craft of a local inventor? An optical illusion? Or a wrongly dated photograph? No exact information about the design has survived. (1987) England. A woman takes a souvenir photo. She sits in the cockpit of a training aircraft to capture a visit to an airfield. At first, everything looks normal. But after the film is developed, next to her, in the seat of the second pilot, a male silhouette appears, in an old flight uniform resembling equipment from the Second World War. The woman assures there was no one else in the cockpit. The airfield staff quietly recall a pilot who once died in that aircraft. Experts who studied the photo found no obvious signs of double exposure. You can, of course, chalk everything up to film shift or a strange reflection, but to agree with this or not, everyone decides for themselves, looking at that gaze from the past next to an unsuspecting person. The 1920s, the fashion for spiritualism is at its peak. The medium Colin Evans conducts seances in the dark. People sit in a room, the lights go out, rustling is heard under the ceiling, and then a camera flash goes off. In the photos, Evans is captured in the air. He seems to hover above the floor, and around him there are stunned witnesses. Today, it is clear. The levitation was most likely created much more simply. The medium could jump at the moment of the flash, and the darkness and long exposure gave the desired effect. But in those years, photos of a flying man made the effect of a bomb. They still circulate in collections of anomalies, reminding us how easily a human desire to believe turns into evidence, even if very questionable. Mid-1990s. An elderly woman moves into a nursing home. Relatives, as often happens, want to preserve the memory of the moment, take several photos of the room and its new resident. In one of the photos, deep in the frame, a pale silhouette of a man appears. The old woman, seeing the photo, says without hesitation, "That is my husband. He died more than 10 years ago." Relatives assure that during the shooting, there was no one else in the room. Supporters of the supernatural consider this photo one of the most touching proofs that someone continues to be nearby. Skeptics see in it a play of reflections, glare from glass, or a television. But, strangely enough, it is precisely such quiet, everyday stories that sometimes move people more strongly than loud horrors, because they touch the most painful topic, the loss of loved ones. Hampton Court Palace near London has long been famous for its ghost legends. King Henry VIII, his wives, courtiers, every sudden rustle was attributed to them. But in 2003, technology added fuel to the story. A CCTV system recorded a strange cloaked figure coming out of a massive door. The silhouette seems to fling the door open, freezes, and disappears. Security checked the recording and made sure it was not visitors and not staff, and the doors at that moment were closed from the inside. Skeptics explain everything as a technical malfunction, a reflection, or editing. However, officially the recording was recognized as authentic, without signs of third-party interference. In one compilation of pre-revolutionary photographs of Russia, researchers noticed a strange detail. In photos from different years, different places, and with different people, the same girl appeared again and again, in the same cap, with the same facial expression, in similar clothes. She stands either aside from the group or a little behind, but almost never interacts with others, as if a random passerby who, for some reason, constantly ends up next to the photographer. A likely explanation is that some of these photos could have belonged to one family, and the girl was their relative. Then, the photos were simply mixed up. But those who love mysticism see in this a time traveler or a ghost stuck on film. And no matter how many rational arguments are voiced, the feeling of a slight chill when you see the repeating face still remains. In 2005, a surveillance camera in the yard of a private home in the city of Fresno, California, recorded a very strange scene. Two creatures slowly walk across the lawn, resembling white pants without an upper body. Thin, long legs, no torso, movements smooth, almost unreal. Later, similar figures were seen on another recording, already in a national park. Skeptics talked about homemade constructions, puppets, children in costumes, pants on sticks, editing. There are many options, but not a single version was ever finally proven. During the Apollo 17 expedition in 1972, one photo of the lunar surface drew special attention. On it, there are formations that seem to some like correct pyramidal shapes. Conspiracy theory lovers immediately started talking about ancient lunar structures left by someone long before us. The official position is much simpler. These are ordinary hills and rocks, lit at such an angle that they create the illusion of artificial geometry. However, to this day, no one has specially flown to check this area in close-up. Therefore, the photo lives in a suspended state. There is a scientific explanation, but a final full stop in the argument still seems, to many, not yet placed. In 1900, on the remote Flannan Isles off the coast of Scotland, a lighthouse stopped sending signals. When the support team reached the island, 3 keepers had disappeared somewhere. Inside the lighthouse, almost everything was in order. Food on the table, things in place, a journal with entries. But the men themselves were not there, as if they went out for a minute and never returned. Photographs of the island and the empty lighthouse became a visual symbol of this mystery. There are many versions: a giant wave, a conflict between the keepers, an accident, or even something not of this world. But the main mystery is different. How could 3 adult experienced men disappear so that for all these years, not a single body or convincing evidence was found? 1959. A woman comes to a cemetery to visit her mother's grave. After the visit, she photographs her husband sitting behind the wheel of their car. When the photo is developed, on the back seat, you can clearly see another figure, as if a woman in a hat. The family assures, at that moment, no one was sitting in the back seat. Later, acquaintances recognized in the silhouette the deceased mother of the owner of the photograph. An expert who studied the photo found no obvious signs of double exposure. You can argue and play with versions, but the fact remains, this photograph is among the most famous car ghosts, where an unknown passenger appears only after development. A photo from the opening of a bridge in Canada in 1941 was for a long time an ordinary archival picture, until someone noticed in the crowd a man who looks too modern. He seems to have a t-shirt with a print, a zip-up sweater very similar to a modern hoodie, glasses of a shape unusual for those years, and something like a compact camera in his hands. Against this background, all the other people in suits and dresses of the era look much more local. Historians find an explanation. Such clothing and accessories did exist. They were just not as widespread. But for many, this frame remains a perfect illustration of the theme of a person not in their time, even if the rational explanation exists. In some old paintings and early photographs, attentive viewers sometimes notice strange details. For example, a man and a woman by a river, between whom a dark rectangular object with rounded edges is being passed, something like a smartphone. Or a photograph of an indigenous person holding a small rectangle in their hands, as if looking at a screen. Of course, in their time, these could have been notebooks, snuff boxes, cases, small sacred objects. But in the era of gadgets, the brain automatically completes familiar shapes into a phone. Dreamers immediately talk about guests from the future. Historians talk about a banal reinterpretation. But such images show well how strongly our ideas about the world depend on what century we live in. (1889), the town of Nampa in Idaho. Workers drill a well, and at a depth of more than 90 meters, pull to the surface a small clay figurine, a female one, with drawn facial features and clothing. The problem is that by the geological layers of the rock from which it was taken, there should be strata there about 2 million years old, long before the appearance of Homo sapiens. If you believe the layering, it turns out that either we had intelligent ancestors much earlier than is commonly believed, or the figurine somehow got deep later, through cracks, washouts, technogenic processes. Most scientists lean toward the second explanation, but the very fact of the find still excites the imagination of those who look for traces of forgotten civilizations. In one old photo from Chile, 2 men on horseback in a forest are captured. If you look inattentively, it is an ordinary scene. But upon close examination, between the animal's legs, you can see a strange small creature with a large head and a thin body. Some saw in it an alien creature driven under the hooves. Skeptics claim that it is simply a child or a person who was too close to the horses at the moment of shooting, and the strange alien shape was added by the angle and the low quality of the image. But as often happens, poor quality is the best friend of mysticism. The fewer details, the easier it is for imagination to build something completely incredible. In the 15th century painting, Madonna and Child with St. John, on the right side of the sky, you can notice an unusual detail. There, a small glowing object is depicted, at which a man with a dog is looking. A modern viewer immediately thinks of disc-shaped UFOs. Art historians explain it differently. Most likely, it is a symbolic depiction of an angel, a star, or a divine sign. Such a device was common in religious painting of that time. Nevertheless, for those who love to look for traces of cosmic guests in the past, this painting became almost a favorite argument. Supposedly, the artist painted what people saw in his era. In 2008, in one old tomb in China, archaeologists opened a sealed sarcophagus that was closed for several centuries. Among traditional finds, ceramics, jewelry, remains, a small object suddenly turned up, resembling miniature wristwatches with a clasp. On the dial, time froze at the mark 10:06, and on the case back, one could make out the word Swiss. For serious researchers, the explanation is one. Most likely, it is a modern object that somehow got into the excavation after the layer was disturbed, whether through a worker's mistake, a joke, or negligence. But for lovers of time travel stories, this became an ideal mystery. How did Swiss watches end up in a tomb that was closed long before such things appeared? The answer to this question is most likely much more prosaic than one would like, but the story already lives separately from dry archaeological reports. We live in an era when any picture can be faked in a couple of minutes. And yet it is precisely old photographs, grainy, unclear, sometimes badly exposed, that continue to scare us more than the most sophisticated special effects. Why? Because behind many of them there are real people, tragedies, strange coincidences, and mysteries that you can no longer call and ask a question. Some see in these pictures confirmation of their beliefs. Some see a reason to smile and remember the power of human imagination. And now a question for you. Which of these frames seem to you the creepiest, or, on the contrary, the most believable? And most importantly, do you believe that all mysteries caught on camera will someday get an honest, earthly answer? If you want a continuation on the topic of photographs or something we have talked about earlier on the channel, then support the video with a subscription, a like, and a comment with the topic you want to see in the next episode. Thank you for watching, and right now you can check out these videos that appeared on your screen.